What you see before me is commonly referred to as a rain cloud, moving through London at a considerable rate. What separates us from animals, cavemen, and indeed orangutans is the fact that we can abstract and we don't react in a caveman-like manner when we're presented with stressful situations. Chris Hadfield did a talk about how he was in a spacewalk and he was out there in a very vulnerable situation out in space, and his visor steamed up. He didn't panic, he didn't have a crazy reaction, he didn't freak out. He had a procedure and he just went through that procedure and was able to come back and rectify the issue, come back inside the spacecraft. And I thought I had kind of, on the same topic which I've started, I thought I'd narrow that down into something more specific, to kind of help us as riders, to be better riders and to not have caveman reactions, basically. So, made a previous video about crew resource management, how pilots work together in the cockpit to ensure safety of the aircraft and passengers, and sticking to procedures and that kind of thing. I thought I'd narrow that down into two things that are present in, namely, Boeing aircraft, Boeing standard operating procedures, and how they design their cockpits. So, just to give a bit of context, a Boeing cockpit is designed so that you see all the controls. They're very ergonomically well designed. You can see everything moving, because most of the time the aircraft is in autopilot, and you can see if the thrust is being added or reduced, what inputs are being put into the primary flight controls and such. And each pilot has got their own areas of responsibility. The pilot flying and pilot monitoring. And there are just two things I'd like to reduce out of that, and that's scan flows and motor memory. So when you're doing in an aircraft, when you're doing a before takeoff checklist, you have a very specific order of operations as to how you go over the controls and how you select, how you basically check if everything's in its right setting for takeoff or whatever. And the second is motor memory. So scan flows kind of ties into that. Your motor memory is kind of practiced and trained. You train. You just keep repeating the same movements around the cockpit, and that eventually becomes your memory, and you don't have to think about what you're pressing or what you're doing. You just know it. It's off by heart. It's like learning an instrument, and that allows pilots to free up their kind of short-term aptitude if they have to deal with anything else, if they have to actually concentrate on an abnormal occurrence. So I've kind of brought that into how we ride as motorcyclists. The motor memory is used when we do an emergency stop. For example, part of the reason that I'm making this video is because a few days ago I was confronted with a situation where I had to do an emergency stop. I had to initiate one because there was a cyclist came out in front of me. My reaction was terrible. I pulled in the clutch and then subsequently the front brake, and I was thinking about it. I was having to process what to do, and it was completely wrong. My reaction was terrible. I need to practice an emergency stop. And in terms of scan flows, when you give way at a junction, you come to a stop. I've kind of developed a flow of a motor memory. So when I stop, I check mirrors, and do a kind of left to right, right to left of the road ahead, making sure it's clear. The next thing is another scan flow example of motorcycling would be changing lanes, checking the blind spot and making sure there's no one there. It's an essential process which protects us from just running into other cars. Just at a last final glance, as a very rational operation. So first mirrors, indicate, blind spot, maneuver. That's pretty much everything I had to say about kind of reducing my ideas onto very specific things to help us be safer riders. And as you can see, I've just ran the battery down as I've been making this video. I'm gonna have to bump start it, I think. I've never had that on this bike before. Never just run out of power spontaneously.